Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 in our Chats with Emily as we're calling our readings to the poetry of Emily Dickinson in the Johnson edition. We turn now to poem 176, I'm the Little Heart's Ease. Heart's Ease, of course, the pansy violet, one of Emily's favorites, and yet only mentioned one time in all of her poetry, and it will be here. Now, we're back to Emily's love of the Platonic dialogues in this poem. Also, this is one of those rare 14-line offerings of Emily. We don't see a lot of them. If you want to call this a sonnet, I certainly will. Feel free to do that as well. Now, I love that we call our series Chats with Emily, and then here we are, where Emily has a chat with Heart's Ease, the flower. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down that left-hand side, again, Chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful you've already been introduced to the early comments in our introductory lecture, as well as I'm hopeful that you've worked through the preceding 175 poems we just finished with I've Never Seen. Now, if you've been reading along with us, and now we're coming very close to poem 200, you start to recognize that Emily loves to play this nature game, and so we're going to see it played out again. Now, the great scholar Judith Farr's The Gardens of Emily Dickinson will provide some insight into this poem, especially its structure, where we'll have this dialogue format, where in lines 1 through 8, Heart's Ease will talk, obviously Emily identifying with this flower for any number of reasons. In lines 9 through 12, then Emily will respond, and then finally in lines 13 and 14, the couplet, as it will often refer to it, will be the response by Heart's Ease one last time. Notice again her use of the word little. We've said it, in 172 poems, that word little gets used. I'm the little heart's ease. I don't care for pouting skies. If the butterfly delay, can I therefore stay away? I'm the coward bumblebee. If the coward bumblebee in his chimney corner stay, I must resoluter be. Who'll apologize for me? Dear old-fashioned little flower, Eden is old-fashioned too. Birds are antiquated fellows. Heaven does not change her blue. Nor will I, the little heart's ease, ever be induced to do. Now, again, the structure of the poem matters. We begin with the heart's ease speaking and commenting on how little she is, the pansy violet. Notice, I don't care, as a phrase, only gets used one time in all our poetry. It's here. I don't care for pouting skies. In other words, I come early. I don't need to come later in the summer. I am okay with coming before everything else of the springs will bloom. If the bumblebee delay, in other words, early spring, can I therefore stay away? And of course, if she's writing a sonnet of 14 lines, she's even playing with in rhyme and all of that. Again, if the coward bumblebee, in other words, bees don't like to come out too early because it's too cold, and yet notice the heart's ease willingness to do so. I must resoluter be, and I think that's the key word of this poem, resoluter. It only gets used one time in all of Emily's poetry, and it's here. Who'll apologize for me? That is to say, she uses the word apologize here in its old Platonic rendition of Plato's Apology. In other words, not to say I'm sorry, but a defense. In other words, who will defend me if I don't defend myself? Then there's the break, and then we come back with Emily speaking, dear old-fashioned little flower. The first use of old-fashioned, you'll remember in poem 12, 10 different poems will use this phrase, old-fashioned. It is a lot of fun. Dear old-fashioned little flower. Eden is old-fashioned too. 17 poems, Emily will reference Eden, and the idea of Eden being old-fashioned can be, that is to say, from the beginning of time. In other words, this is the way things have always been, and in that regards, it's okay. One of the reasons maybe why Emily is going to identify with it. Birds are antiquated fellows. That is to say, birds are the ones that have to figure it out from long, long ago. By the way, in poem 1345, we have antiquated grace, and in poems 1514, we have antiquated trees. And you'll remember in poem 175, in the earlier poem, she said it this way, if some loving antiquary playing with the same idea of old. It is interesting the way that Emily will place herself in both the ancient Eden as well as, we would argue, the modern, right? Somehow unusual. And then finally, heaven does not change her blue. In other words, there are things which must always be, and she says that's just the way it is. And now to finish, the flower will come back, Heartsease, nor will I, the little Heartsease, ever be induced to do. In other words, I'm not going to change either. At 2a, I think the argument is that if a little flower can sustain, then so can I. And I think Emily, no question, Emily's playing around with that notion of sustainability, resoluteness, and the like. At 2b, I love the dialogue format here. I love that she uses the notion of the apology of Plato, and of course the sonnet forming as well. And it's fair to ask how many of Emily's poems will fall into this 14-line type of poetry. You can obviously look for it. What are we going to relate this to? I think this takes us back to Shelley's Ode to the West Wind, where he will say it at the end, if winter come, can spring be far behind? In other words, stay with it, stick with it, much like Heartsease. Don't give up, because that's the nature of things. Finally, at 3b, what was a time that you made it through a tough time and you were resolute? Of course, reading Emily's poetry will help us do that, I hope. Thank you.